Shalom from Israel, I'm Ariel Ben Abraham. This week we're going to reflect on chapter 36 of the book of Psalms by King David. It's interesting because the chapter has some kind of introduction. It says, for the director, the musical director, because as we said before, the songs were sung in the Temple of Jerusalem by the Levites. And of course there was a director leading the choir, and also David in many instances composed these psalms for particular instruments. So sometimes we see the introduction, for the director, the musical director, or for this particular instrument, this specific or that specific psalm. In this case, it's for the musical director from or by David, the servant of the Lord. So we want to remark this introduction because, in others we say, for the musical director, this psalm for guitar or for harp or for different instrument. In this case, David is introducing the psalm as God's servant. We want to remark on that because in the previous chapters that we have discussed, if you have watched them, we emphasize in David's humbleness. And this is a signal, a clear signal of his humbleness. So I'm the servant of God. It's like, I have no personal agenda here. My personal agenda is to serve God. So this is essential to understand, to get the idea behind this. And the lesson, we are destined, as the Jewish people, to serve God. That's our identity. When we read the Torah, we see that that's our mission. We were chosen to serve Him. We were taken out of Egypt, the house of slavery, to be the servants of God. So David is leading, is the king, is the one who is leading the people. By leading, we're not talking about, like the king in the way the nations, or the traditional view of the king. It's an anchor point, it's a reference. It's a leading aspect of consciousness that have the determination and the willingness and, let's say, the stubbornness to be connected with God. That's the service, by the way. Serving God is being connected to Him. How we connect to God, to our common bond with Him. What are common bonds with Him? Righteousness, goodness, loving kindness, truth. So like the essential elements that we have as common with Him. And He wants us to relate to Him in that, with those references. So being the servant of God is being, having, and doing the traits, the ways, and attributes that are common between God and us. That's our service. Now, in a deeper level, our sages in the Talmud, they define the prayer service, praying to God, as the service of God. So we serve God by praying to Him. And this is interesting because these verses of praise, the Psalms, are precisely this. These are prayers. So David is serving God by praying to Him through these praises. So what we in Hebrew said, Avodat Hashem, that's what it means. It's like praying, like being in contact with Him, being in connection, bonding with Him. That's our service. That's how we serve Him. And it's interesting because we have said in other commentaries, in our blog, and probably in these videos, that in Hebrew, the verb to pray, yes, is a reflexive verb. It's like brushing the teeth, combing the hair, washing ourselves. It's a reflective action. So how could that be? It's like I'm praying myself, so to speak. This is hard to understand. It's like, how could it be praying could be a reflexive verb in Hebrew? But think about it. Because the benefit is for us. We're not benefiting God from this. That's the reason why it's a reflexive verb. When we do something to ourselves, it's for our benefit. We brush our teeth, we comb our hair, we shower ourselves. It's a reflexive action for our own benefit, by the way, or purpose. And this is exactly what it is when we pray. We're praying to ourselves. I mean, not praying like we are God and we are praying. It's the action that we are investing in ourselves. And how we do that, let's put an analogy. What is the soap that we shower with? This, the Psalms. The verses the words that define prayer. See, the prayer book, this is the soap. So you start reading the prayer book, we are basically applying the soap on us. And what is the soap? What is the meaning? What is the content? This is the content. Excuse me. This is the context. The content. So we start praising God all the time. We acknowledge Him as the King, the ruler, our creator, our source of life. And in that acknowledgement, we do the reflexive action. We get the benefit for ourselves. It's important to assimilate this. Because usually the idea that we have about prayer is it's not a reflexive thing. It's a direct, active, not passive. The active verbs, passive verbs, and reflexive verbs. So we're talking about active. It's like we're sitting, we're standing or sitting. Talking to God is an active. We are proclaiming, we're doing something that is active. That's the way it is understood. But in a deeper level, we're talking about that it's a reflexive action. We're getting benefit from this. It's for our own sake. So, by David, the servant of the Lord. Verse 1. I have a message from God in my heart concerning the sinfulness of the wicked. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Again, David starts the prayer with a moral, ethical statement. Like premise, like preamble, like introduction. And again, we have to repeat, we have to say why, because David repeats it in every psalm. So if he's repeating, we have to say he's repeating and why he's repeating. We have to explain. And we have to say it again. Why he's doing this, why he's bringing up the issue of wicked people and evil people, people who have no fear of God. By fear, we're talking about reverence, as we said before, acceptance and respect. That's what fear means in this case. These people have no respect for goodness. They don't like goodness. That's why they do evil. So David is inviting us again to reflect in the approach. How do we approach God? having into account what is good and what is evil, what is true and what is false, what is correct, what is incorrect. With that approach, with that awareness, we start connecting, bonding with God. It's like God knows, oh, you are separating yourself from evil. And you are looking, you're pursuing the common bond with God, which is goodness. It's a good start. So, David started, I have a message from God in my heart. So God is telling him, choose goodness. That's the message in our hearts. Concerning the sinfulness, like to bear in mind also, having in the heart is also to bear in mind, to be aware of the sinfulness of the wicked. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now, verse 2. In their own eyes, the eyes of the wicked, they flatter themselves too much to detect or hate their sin. This is one of the major sins or transgressions that our sages in the Talmud bring up all the time, is arrogance and wrath. They say that those are the worst kinds of idolatry. So you don't understand what is the connection between idolatry and being angry. Just think about it. They became idols. So we serve anger by being angry. We serve haughtiness by being arrogant. So they're idols. We serve them. We put our consciousness in their service. That's what it is. So in this case, they flatter themselves too much to detect or hate their sin. They're so self-centered in their wrongdoings and in the wrong conceptions that they have about life that they don't see. They're completely blind. That's why our sages say that arrogance and wrath are the worst form of idolatry. They get us blind. We don't see. We're so self-centered in our own anger, in our own arrogance, that we don't see the picture. We don't see anything. So this is what David is saying here. This is too much. They're so self-centered, so blind in their sinfulness, which is what we're talking about here. These egos, fantasies, and illusions, these negative trends and traits in consciousness that they don't see. That we're entrapped in our own negative illusions. Really, we're trapped. And we don't see. We don't see the way out. We see our isolation. That's what we call captivity. That's what we call a trap. We can't get out. Okay? Verse 3. The words of the mouth are wicked and deceitful. They fail to act wisely or do good. Obviously, we are so centered in the way we want things to be. How are we going to see the objective aspect of life, the objectivity of life, which is the pursuing of goodness? That's what is objective. When we're in a situation, what we pursue is like, we have to get the best out of this. We say we're in a negative situation, we immediately try to focus on how we get out of there or fix it. But that's the way it is. That's the objectivity of life. The goodness is the objective part of life. The subjective part of life is evil. It's like, I'm going to do it my way, I'm going to harm others in order to get this. Based of coveting, greed, envy, lust. But that's not objective, that's subjective. Oh, we call it egos, fantasies, and illusions. Do you have something more subjective than ego? So that's the thing that we have to reflect on. Now, David is putting it in a way in which it's impossible that anything good can come out of them. Why? They're blocked, they're trapped in their own illusion, negative illusion. Verse 4. Even on their beds, they plot evil. It's like they're so trapped in their own illusion that they cannot see anything good. Or everything that they perceive is for their own benefit at the expense of others or the harm of others. They commit themselves to a sinful course, like way, like destination, direction, and do not reject what is wrong. So they live in their own fantasy, believing that they're right and everybody's wrong, etc. We know this very well. Do you see these fanatic Islamic movements, that they want to conquer the world, by force and this kind of thing? They believe they're right. Obviously, with killing people and hanging people and destroying everything they find everywhere. It's the way they do it. They think they're right. That's why they act that way, by the way. But they don't see anything good here. They see destruction and say that they want to impose their way, which is destruction. The elimination of freedoms, free will. It's like what the human nature or consciousness will be without these basic values of the dignity of life, the respect for life. There's nothing. Yeah. And they do not reject what is wrong. Why? Because they live in wrongness. Wrong is the lifestyle. It's like they live the wrong way, with the wrong ideas, with the wrong feelings, with the wrong emotions, with the wrong thoughts, with the wrong ideologies. It's close to impossible that they would know, that they would go back to the objectivity that we were talking about. They're not objective. They don't see reality. They don't see the objectivity of reality, which is pursuing the welfare and goodness as individuals, as a society, as a nation, as a collective, as humankind. They forget about that. They don't want to know about that, and they fight it on top of that. They're militants. It's a militant ignorance. It's an ignorance that fights. So then we have to eradicate these people. We really have to eliminate them. I mean, we cannot allow this. The problem is that some people in the world who are not like them, they allow them. It's like, hey, this is part of cultural diversity. This is part of human consciousness. Hey, they're evil people. They are pedophiles. They are prejudiced people. They have hateful people. They hate, like to hate. That's part of the cultural diversity of life. Excuse me. And then when they have these savages in their societies, they say, oh, we didn't mean that. It's you didn't mean that. You allow them. You let them be part of your societies, in your countries, in your nations, cities. And then they want to take over, they want to put their rules and impose their rules on you. And that's not cultural diversity now. It's interesting, no? This is the problem that we have. We are not objective. We lost objectivity. All the international bodies, they lost objectivity. They don't know what right is. And they accept wrong as something right. So they are becoming wicked and evil as the enemies that we have, that we're fighting now. So, think about it. Verse 5. Your love, God, reaches to the heavens. It's interesting. The love of God reaches to the heavens, like reach out. Should reach down to earth, but David knows what he's saying, so let's read. Reaches to the heavens, your faithfulness to the firmament. Now, what David is saying is, he is in heaven, that's the source. That's from where God's loves come. When we're talking about heaven, we're talking about firmament, the metaphor that we clearly see, there's something that is very high, elevated, like really, really high. We cannot even measure how high it is instead of elevation. So this is where God's love dwells. Now, when we're talking about highest points, we're not talking about necessarily, oh, it's so far from us. We can reach out to it, it's too high in the heavens. No, it's exactly the opposite. Precisely because this is so high, so sublime. This is the kind of love that we receive from God. The highest, the most elevated, the highest of all. The highest form of the Spirit. By form, we're talking about quality that we may grasp. Okay? Verse 6. Your righteousness is like the highest mountains. That's exactly what we're talking about. The highest mountains. What are the highest mountains? The highest levels of consciousness. Okay. Your justice is like the great deep. It's interesting. Talking about righteousness is high and justice goes down. Again, we're talking about God's creation, and He encompasses all. Everything is in His control and direction. So when He says that the justice is like the deep, the great deep, is like His justice goes as down as we can imagine or conceive. It's like it reaches everywhere, even the deepest places that we don't see. Now, what is God's justice? His ways and attributes. The way He handles, relates to His creation. So when we're talking about the righteousness, it's like the highest mountain. We're talking about the earth. We're talking about the material world, which has high mountains and it has also abysses, depths. So both righteousness mean goodness, and the pursuing and the defense of goodness, which is justice, encompasses all aspects of human consciousness, all aspects of the material world, reaches everywhere. You, Lord, preserve both people and animals. It's exactly the context of it. Reaches everything, even the beast and us. Like nothing escapes from God's love, God's righteousness, and God's justice. Okay? Verse 7. How priceless is your unfailing love? Unfailing love, like faithful. Like faithful, we say last week and the weeks before, what is the faithfulness of God? The air is the best example that we have. The air is faithful. It's there for us. It's loyal. It doesn't go away. It doesn't say, you're not going to breathe me. No. Same thing. God is faithful with His creation, meaning He sustains His creation. Feeds. That's what we call sustenance. Feeds us. How priceless is your unfailing love? It's the love for His creation. The one saying that this sustenance is God's love. It's easy to get to grasp God's love. It's not difficult. We see a baby suckling with his mother or her mother. Her mother is nursing the baby. That's exactly a perfect analogy to understand God's love. It's love. Oh, being objective, the mother is feeding the baby. Yeah, but what is the motivation behind it? Oh, she doesn't want her baby to die. Exactly. And what is that? Oh, she's caring for him. And what is that? It's protecting him. You say, what is that? It's love. It's exactly the same with God's love. And it's here. How priceless. We cannot fathom. We cannot grasp this. It's the greatest love of all. It's beyond our imagination, beyond our understanding. People take shelter, refuge, in the shadow of your wings. This is when God has wings. Of course he doesn't have wings. He doesn't have form or shape, we know that. But when we see open wings, especially a bird in her nest, covering the little ones, it's love. She's protecting them under her wings. So this is the analogy here. This is what we have to understand. People take refuge in the shadow. The shadow is not just below, it's like, it's the shadow. This is the coolness in contrast to the heat of the sun. So we are in a shade, like it's cool. Now, David is using these analogies because he was living in the desert, was living in ancient times. Like, see the birds. So this is the references, the ecological references he has to write the metaphors for us to understand. Now we have to find out the meanings of these metaphors. 8. They feast on the abundance of your house. You give them drink from your river of delights. David is praising God's sustenance of his creation as the most delightful of all foods. We're talking about God's sustenance. We're not talking about the fruits of the tree or the animals that we eat or anything like that. No. This is beyond grasp. They feast, so we're delighted in the abundance of your house. Of course, it's abundant. It's endless. Endless. So this is not an abundance like, oh, at some point it's going to last, for 2 years, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. No. This is endless. So when David is talking about abundance, talking about God's abundance, which is endless because God is endless. Of your house, since God has a house, no. What is the house? When we dwell in a house, this is what we are. So in modern semantics, the house represents consciousness. So when we are walking in the street, or we're sitting, or we are alone, our house is our consciousness. It's not the place that we are here. We are within ourselves. This is our house. This is our house. So think about that. We are a walking house. We are in our own house. Our consciousness is our house. Now, what is God's consciousness? God doesn't have consciousness. God is undescribable. Again, we're talking about God's ways and attributes. That's God's home, from which we connect. So the connection in the temple, the house, God's house, this is ways and attributes. And then we connect with Him, we all make the offerings, and we bond with Him in His house, together with Him, by doing His ways and attributes. That's the delight of God's house. And And we're talking about peace, we're talking about loving kindness, we're talking about abundance, we're talking about happiness, we're talking about grace, talking about truth, talking about justice. Isn't that delightful? It's the feast of our consciousness, living in the love of God. Because all these things are God's love. So the house of God is God's love. And we want to dwell and we want to feast in the abundance of His house. Okay. You see, this is that you give them drink from your river of delights. What is the river here? What are those waters? The Torah is the river. It's to drink. So, we need to feed ourselves. It's interesting because thirst is different than hunger. So the semantic meaning of thirst in terms of consciousness is knowledge. Knowledge. And food is substance, physical substance. It's interesting that the Torah is compared to water. It's not compared to an animal to eat or, I don't know, milk also, but water, knowledge. 9, for with you, God, is the fountain of life. So David is basically paraphrasing, sending the same message for us to grasp that we are an extension of God's love. And God's love is our source. And God's love's ways and attributes as the material manifestation of God's love, among other things, His ways and attributes, is a substance, a source of life. Without them, we're nothing, we're death. So we see many people, they're completely disconnected with God in their awareness. We can call them walking dead. Say, yeah, but they're alive, they have jobs, they have families. Sure. Where is their awareness into? In what? Fantasies and illusions. Yeah. The fantasy of power, the fantasy of control, the fantasy of possessions, material possessions. So, for you, with you is the fountain of life. In your light, we see light. So that we need to know, we need to grasp, to assimilate, to learn the knowledge of God. We have to know God. That's the light that we need in order to see. In order to see what is beyond. In order to see what is the purpose of this objective approach to life we call goodness. So, for with you is the fountain of life, in your light we see light. Verse 10, it says, continue or maintain your love to those who know you, your righteousness to the upright in heart. So it's like, we share your goodness, we are aware, we're praising your light, we're praising you as the source of our life, the feast that we experience when we live in your house, in your ways and attributes. Keep connected to us, keep bonding with us. Don't allow us to stray away from this awareness, from this consciousness. This is what David is asking. And again, the ethical points, like your righteousness to the upright in heart. It's like, let's share your righteousness. May our righteousness and your righteousness one, that we bond with, to have, to be, and to do. So again, this goodness, this objectivity that we're talking about is an ethical principle. It's a righteousness. It's the right thing to do. It's the proper thing to do. David is asking. God is like, don't get me out. That's what the introduction about the evil people and the wicked people is like. This is the contrast. So I want to be in the side of goodness, God. And be with me. Continue loving me. Continue feeding me. And keep me in this awareness all the time. 11. May the food, this is the closing the circle of the chapter. May the foot of the proud, of the arrogant, not come against me. See, this literally means like an arrogant people is coming to me. God, don't let him get close to me. An arrogant people, I don't want them. No. Yeah, it is this also. But you have to understand that how come, it's like, don't let arrogance put a foot on my consciousness. That's what he's asking God. That don't let me fall in arrogance. I want to be the humble, the vessel of humbleness for you to pour your love, your loving kindness and truth, your justice, your righteousness. It's like, don't allow the arrogant approach to life put a foot on my consciousness. I don't want that. I don't want to be arrogant in order to be angry and upset and separating myself from the objectivity of life, which is goodness. This selfless approach to life. When we're talking about objectivity, we're talking about selflessness. It's like, I'm putting myself out of here, I'm going to be objective. Nor the hand of the wicked drive me away. See, now he's more specific. He's like, don't let negative traits and trends in consciousness take me away from your house. Take me away from your ways and attributes. Take me away from your love. It's a beautiful prayer. And the last verse of this chapter 36 of the book of Psalms, we see it's an ethical ending. At the beginning with ethical approach, the ending an ethical approach. It's very important. That's why we emphasize this so much. We see how the evildoers lie fallen, thrown down, not able to rise. It's like we know that living in negative traits and trends in consciousness keeps you down in consciousness. And we are not able to rise. We know that, by the way. So when we are trapped in our negative trends, in our wrath, in our arrogance, in our envy, in our lust, in our coveting, in our lusting, out of feelings and beliefs of lack, we're trapped. We're down. And we're not able to rise. Rise to where? To what? Goodness. Love's ways and attributes. So, this is our reflections on Psalm 36 in the book of Psalms by King David. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share with you all these thoughts, these views, based on the Hasidic mystic tradition in Judaism, And we try to see what are the meaning of these metaphors, what is the meaning behind these prayers, to get us close more and more to our Creator. And may His promised final redemption come to us fast in our days. So with this, we wish you, as usual, an abundantly blessed week. Shabbat Shalom, and until next time.